Well, so I have a question, and I know you've told me this before, but I've clearly forgotten. You were talking about how as they're maturing, they'll get better at this. How does the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, I don't understand, and really I should have done better because my prefrontal cortex is fully cooked and I still don't wake me up is the bottom line. Don't wake me up. But when can we all expect the prefrontal cortex to get there? How does it work? How does it fall into this nervous system stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know what the absolute latest research is saying about that, but it seems like that age keeps getting older and older. It used to be the early 20s is when they felt like your brain was
26 was
fully
what I
formed,
had
but
heard.
then it got up to 24, then 26. Now I think it might be pushing even higher than that. Like it might be almost into our 30s. And you mentioned in another conversation we had that there's some research that says that technology may be actually stretching that out farther, like the idea of being on screens and maybe delaying some of that development. This is not authoritative or anything along those lines at
No,
this
and I
point.
don't
We'll have
think
to
any
do
of
some
us know for
research,
sure
but
at this point.
the good news about brains is they've realized they're much more plastic, even more than we thought. So they are changeable. We can work on things. We can improve even when we're older. But the trick is if they're not fully formed yet, they may not have the maturity or the capability of doing some of these things. And again, I don't know what the biological underpinnings of all this would be for a neurodivergent brain versus a neurotypical brain. But we do know that they definitely have different ways of processing that seems to be evident in their behavior and how they describe things. But really, the proof is in the pudding for the most part from that. Most kids, if they can do well, they will. If they could manage their emotions better, they would do so. They would
Right.
try. So I always like to assume that they're doing the best they can under the circumstances. And so even if you have a 25, 26, 27, 30-year-old, they may still be working on some emotional regulation stuff that other people may have picked up in their late teens or early 20s. I do think that awareness about it and learning about it helps at least get your brain thinking about what it's doing instead of autopilot. This is an interesting discussion because it's meta in some ways that we are trying to train our prefrontal cortex, our upstairs brain, to understand what's going on with our downstairs brain so then we can have a little bit more influence or control over it. Maybe that's evolution in a nutshell, right? That our prefrontal cortex is a new thing that humans developed, that now we can think about stuff, that we have that capability that not a lot of other animals that we know of are able to do that. And so that's that evolutionary key that we can use our prefrontal cortex to understand and perhaps override some of these autonomic systems. And you can hear some interesting anecdotes too about, say, yogis who can really reduce their heart rate and almost go into a hibernation of some sort, right? That they
Yeah.
can control their autonomic nervous systems more than the average person because they practiced it or they got good at it or they worked on it. So, and, we can regulate our breathing to a certain extent for sure. That's one thing that we have some control over. But obviously, if we get oxygen deprived enough, our brain will take over and make us breathe. Right? So there's some limits to that, but I think there's also some opportunities. And again, if we talk about how to regulate and we talk about breathing, breathing is one way to trick your autonomic nervous system into believing that things are okay. And that's why breathing exercises are an important kind of coping mechanism that's commonly talked about in therapeutic and meditation literature. Things like box breathing or just taking 2 or 3 really slow, deliberate breaths will signal to your autonomic nervous system that everything's okay. So it's a
So
way
maybe
to
if I had woken
override
up in
that.
the middle of the night and taken those 3 deep breaths, I might have had a better shot at. I'm
Yeah,
serious
no,
though.
true, but then you'd have to be. I mean, that's a tricky one because
Yeah.
you are asleep. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
like you're coming
Right.
right into consciousness. You'd have to be thinking pretty quick. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
To
I'm not a
catch
deep
that and do
sleeper.
something
I'm
about it.
not a deep sleeper, so I probably could pull it off. My husband, on the other hand, could not. There's nobody in there. When he's asleep, he's asleep. But I was just thinking about what a parent can do when you're in that moment, right? That you're in that fight or flight and you have that split second where you can make a choice. If you take those 3 deep breaths, it's at least something physically you can do to help yourself make a better choice. Is that true? I mean, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we can do a whole other video on some of these techniques on how to regulate and co-regulate, which we probably should, right? We'll get
Right.
there,
Yeah.
and maybe we'll get to some of that now. But while we're on the topic, certainly breathing exercises are one of the most common things. Or if you think about the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, if you go for a walk or remove yourself from the situation, that's a good way. It's like you're simulating getting out of a dangerous situation, right? So if you were saying, hey, I need to take space, I need to take a timeout, or I need to take a break, I'll be right back. So you let the person know that you're getting overwhelmed or distressed and you need to take a break, but you will come back. I think that's an important part of that. If you just leave, then they might pursue you or or feel
Right. Well, plus you're
abandoned
modeling.
or something. Yeah, and you're modeling. So the idea of, yeah, you want to try to telegraph what your actions are, but again, that takes a certain amount of awareness on your part to say, hey, I'm getting overwhelmed. I can start to feel the anxiety coming up, or I feel like I'm getting angry, or I'm getting tense. So I need to take a break. So I need to now let the other person know, hey, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I'm going to take a break. I'll be back in about 15 minutes or something like that. Then if you leave and go walk, walking is like you're taking action to do something, right? So your body starts to think, oh, okay, we're solving the problem. We're taking action. So sometimes that helps with anxiety and other things, like you just walking or moving forward or moving in your environment is a signal to your autonomic nervous system that you're doing something to solve the problem. Like if you're
That's
running away from
interesting.
a predator or something like that, right? But again, it takes that. Then this is the key, and why I like to talk about this. If you know it's coming on, you get better at recognizing it in yourself, and then can also become more aware of when it's happening in your son or daughter. In fact, it may be easier to see it in somebody else. Well, let me rephrase that. It's definitely easier to see it in somebody else because we're biologically programmed to pick up on that information. If somebody's getting dysregulated, we need to know because they may be becoming a threat to us. So we are keyed in to this in other people. So yeah, you're more likely to see it in somebody else before you see it in yourself. But again, seeing it in somebody else is also like a signal to yourself to say, okay, where am I at on this? Because they're going to pull me into it if I don't pay attention.
Right.
And another side note, but it's an interesting piece of this, is that when you're in that mode, you feel like you're in the right place. And that's why it's hard to override
Mm.
it. Your body and your brain are in total communication with, hey, we are in a dangerous situation. We need to survive. And that's more important than anything else that's going on right now, right? No matter what is happening, even the safety of your loved ones or your son or daughter. Because if you feel like you're in a great enough threat situation, then the highest priority becomes that. So it's hard to override that system once it gets started because it's trying to save your life. So catching it early on and being aware of it is the key to sense that you're slipping into it. If you can sense it, then you're probably still aware enough to do something about it, but it still takes a lot of effort because you feel justified. Like, well, that kid just lied to me. What a punk. It's being a punk. He just lied to me.
Yep.
All of a sudden you're there instead of going, oh, they must be concerned that they're going to get in trouble right now, or they may be worried about our relationship. So they're trying to protect the relationship. So that doesn't mean you just let them get away with lying, unless, of course, you're into freeze or fawn. Then you just let them lie away and okay, you go along with it, right? But you could say, hey, why don't you take a minute and re-answer that? Take a minute, think about it, and answer again. You're not in trouble. You just need to know. So you can maybe do some things to help them get out of that automatic knee-jerk fight, flight, or freeze response, and then come back and feel more comfortable to tell you the truth. Particularly if you lay the groundwork like, hey, it's safe right now. If you didn't take out the trash, that's okay. I just would need you to go do it if you haven't done it yet.
Which also builds trust again.
Yeah. Yeah, because they may be seeing it as a relationship issue, and maybe in the past it has been if they've not taken out the trash or not done their chores, and it's become a big area of conflict in the relationship, or they feel embarrassed. They feel like they should remember it, but they can't remember it for whatever reason. If they're ADHD or autism is getting in the way of them being able to accomplish a task that they know they should be able to do, and that can be embarrassing or humiliating. So there may be a lot of reasons why they may not be telling you the truth in that moment, that if you give them some space either to rethink or to calm back down and get out of that immediate trauma response, essentially, or that immediate fear response, that they can maybe have a better conversation about it, particularly if you lay the groundwork as a parent that it's safe and it's okay and we'll solve the problem. If it didn't happen, we'll work on it. You're okay. It's not the end of the world. We just need to talk about this and solve the problem. Then that might give them more opportunity to do that. But if you fly right into your downstairs brain, then you won't be in a place to be able to have that kind of conversation, right? Because you'll be upset already. But again, this is super important because it's modeling how to regulate your behavior. So by you regulating your behavior in that situation, you are vicariously teaching them by example how to regulate their emotions. And it's one of the most powerful ways to do it. So if you can show that you can manage your emotions under certain circumstances, then it gives them an example or something to see that as possible. And then you can take those opportunities to talk about it and make it more transparent, more explicit about how you do that. You can say, wow, yeah, initially when I heard that, I got a little bit like, oh, but then I thought, no, let's talk about this and solve the problem. I took a step back. I thought about it. I said, maybe we should just have a conversation and see if we can solve this problem. And sure enough, that helped you be able to tell me what's really going on. And then we got the trash done and everything was fine. Right. So
Yep.
you can take those opportunities to dissect those little moments that help them see that it's possible and also experience it as possible. But if
Well, and
every time they're falling into it, you're falling into it, then they just say, this is how life is. You
it's
don't,
so worth the investment. Yeah, it really is.